WISC-TV now presents For the Record.
Reflecting on the nearly completed campaigns of 2016 and looking ahead to Tuesday's election is next on For the Record. Thanks for joining us. I'm Neil Heinen. It is an election most of us will never forget. An election that may or may not change how we look at elections and politics and our country and ourselves. And while there is a palpable sense of wanting it to be over with, there is also a widespread desire to understand what just happened and to know how we will respond to what comes next. I've invited a group of colleagues with deep roots and big jobs in our community to share their insights and observations. And I welcome to For the Record Madison Magazine editor Karen Lincoln Michelle, Madison and Milwaukee radio host Darrell Connor, and La Movida programming director Luis Montoto. Thank you all very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Gracias, Neil.
So I guess, I kind of want to get your general impressions to start with, Karen, about this election. Things that have just struck you in either a historic perspective or, as one of the most unusual elections I think we can remember.
Yeah, one word I would say is just unpredictable. Yeah. I think, when this first started, we were thinking, it wouldn't be this, I guess maybe contentious or, there are just so many things that have been unpredictable. One thing that I would say is that I've been in journalism for, more than 25 years, and one of the things that I'm critical of is how we cover elections, how the national media particularly covers elections, and it's a lot of polling. And I think we've seen a lot of polling, but not enough substance. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing that really concerns me as someone who really likes to watch politics.
Both of you working in radio, and radio has been increasingly influential in politics and elections over the last couple of decades. I don't know if it reached its zenith in this election, but clearly there has been conversation nonstop among your listeners having to do with this election.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of conversation, not only among listeners, but I think also among talk show hosts as well. And I think what's been interesting about this particular election is the talk show hosts who have normally been on a particular track, whether they lean left or right or they're all the way there, how they've taken a particular stance when it comes to the candidates. You've seen talk show hosts who have vehemently opposed Trump, and you've seen some who have opposed Clinton too, and that's been unlike anything that we've seen in recent memory. Mm-hmm.
For the Latino community, it's surprising on how the American voters have a short memory. For the Latino community, one of the candidates obviously is viewed as a monster, and that is just not comprehended on how a person with those type of views, blatant and out in everybody's view, is still getting votes and still getting along with all the campaign.
Yeah. Now, but since you brought this up, Luis, there may be very small in number, but the profile given to Latinos in support of Donald Trump that show up either in his ads or in some of the national media, how is that perceived in the community?
The Latinos that obviously show up in the national campaigns are not very well perceived, and especially with what he started day number one with mentioning the Mexican community being rapists and being drug dealers, and he assumes that some of them might be good, but that just in itself is incomprehensible.
Yeah, and I mean, this veers close to stereotyping as well, Luis, but there is I think a perception that the Latino community will lean more socially conservative in a lot of areas, which can sometimes lead to comfort in the Republican Party. But that has been, what you're saying is that's been offset by immigration issues.
Exactly. Immigration is the #1 issue. I don't understand how Republicans don't get that Latinos are very conservative, religious, Catholics, and they still marginalize the Latino community by bringing up immigration. And with the rhetoric going on in this election, in 2016, it just marginalizes more the Latino community, especially with Donald Trump's comments in regards to Judge Curiel, which he's from Mexican descent. He's born in Indiana, and he goes to the race card immediately. So that just is incomprehensible.
Well, I can tell you, Luis, why they don't seem to get it, because I think Republicans have made a grave mistake even with African American voters for many years, and that is the failure to understand and realize that many African Americans in this country are conservative as well socially. You think about the church, among other issues, conservative in a lot of different ways, and the failure to pick up on that. Now, there have been exceptions. George W. Bush picked up on that and reached out to the faith community and received between 12 and 13% of the African American vote in 2000. So he understood how to reach, or some of the ways to reach African American voters. Jack Kemp understood that, and there's been a few others, but for the most part, they have failed in that area. So it doesn't surprise me at all if you look at the the Latino vote and the growing amount of voters out there of Latin descent, that there's an opportunity miss, and there continues to be one.
I think if the Republican candidate would have been Jeb Bush, I think he would have had a better chance of being elected president than Donald Trump, because of his acceptance on immigration, his stance on immigration, and that he is married to a Mexican. He speaks Spanish. I think that would have been a better message than the actual nominee.
Right. Well, in this race, it seems like there's no real strategy on how to reach people of color and communities of color.
On both sides.
Yeah, right, on both sides. And just, with Native Americans, I mean, there's no real talk about them in the campaign, and if there was any mention of them, it was by Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders really had, I think, a lot of attention by Native American voters.
Yep.
And it had to energize them.
All right, so I think what you're saying, that the candidates are responding to this divide, and maybe on a lot of different levels. And I want to talk about that when we come back right after this.
First of all, I had a very good meeting with the president of Mexico. Very nice man. We will be doing very much better with Mexico on trade deals, believe me. The NAFTA deal signed by her husband's one of the worst deals ever made of any kind, signed by anybody. It's a disaster. Hillary Clinton wanted the wall. Hillary Clinton fought for the wall in 2006 or thereabouts. Now, she never gets anything done, so naturally the wall wasn't built. But Hillary Clinton wanted the wall.
I think it's an idea that would rip our country apart. I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. And my comprehensive immigration reform plan, of course, includes border security. But I want to put our resources where I think they're most needed, getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported. We should deport them. What we all saw and heard on Friday was Donald talking about women, what he thinks about women, what he does to women.
These vicious claims about me of inappropriate conduct with women are totally and absolutely false.
She gained a massive amount of weight, and it was a real problem.
He called this woman Miss Piggy. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
Her
this?
name
Where
is
did you find
Alicia
this?
Machado. He said that he could not possibly have done those things to those women because they were not attractive enough for
I did not say
them to be assaulted.
I did not say that.
Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you.
He also went after a disabled reporter, mocked and mimicked him on
Wrong.
national television.
I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember.
We've seen all those before, and it's still, it's just amazing to see that together. The election is blessedly just a few days off. I'm here with Karen Lincoln Michelle, the editor of Madison Magazine, Darrell Connor, a radio host in both Milwaukee and Madison, and Luis Montoto, who is the programming director at La Movida. We were talking about divisiveness, and I want to just spend a couple of minutes reflecting on that. It's been talked about so much, but as you all talked about the candidates and how they're approaching the racial divide, to some degree, it seems to me they are exploiting it either by how they approach it or by how they don't approach it. And so we have this ongoing dialogue, this national dialogue, that we are as divided as we have ever been in our lives. And it does feel that way, but as you said, you've been doing this for a couple of decades, Karen. How would you explain that divide right now in this election?
Well, I think a lot of people are saying that Donald Trump really tapped into some anger that's been out there. Over the years, there's been more of a movement toward, really watching what we say and being more sensitive to people who are different. Now there's a total turnaround where it's almost like fair game on talking about people. And, I think that is something that, people are responding to both negatively and positively.
Yeah. I mean, so the divide is rooted in fear, anxiety, sometimes envy. I mean, there's a lot of different components to it, but it is very real. I mean, and it's part of this nation's fabric right now. From what you're hearing from folks, how important is this to them?
Well, I think it is important for a number of reasons. But getting back to Karen's point. When you look at the politically correct crowd or the politically correct statement or the fact that many people talk about we're being too politically correct, I think that's true to a degree, but what you find in a lot of cases is it depends on who it is. If it's someone you like and they say something that can be considered offensive to someone else, then it's okay. Then we have this conversation of, why can't we say what we want to say? But when it's something that offends them, it becomes a different story. So it really depends on who's saying it, and it depends on whether or not that person is liked or not. And we see that a lot of times. So it's basically a contradiction for a lot of people. I think when it comes to issues involving race in this country, I think what people are tired of is, whether it's the media, whether it's politicians themselves, I think people are tired of everything being put into a category. Mm-hmm. That you have to make sure that you talk about a particular issue involving a certain group of people. And I feel that this should be, and many people feel this should be something that's natural. Because even though we have differences, we're all the same, basically. And we all, at least most of us, want the same things out of life.
As Americans.
Exactly. Yeah. So this effort to have to make sure that we talk about a certain issue involving certain people, this real effort to make sure we do that or we ignore it at all, I think frustrates a lot of people because, I think for most Americans, they want the same things. Again, they want the same things out of life as everybody else. And they feel like they always get put into these special boxes or special categories when folks are talking to them. It almost feels like you're aliens from outer space. Mm-hmm. I've said that often on the radio. And I think that's what people are frustrated with. They're tired of being talked to like they're different from everyone else.
I think it's a consequence of Donald Trump's initiation into the presidential campaign, where day one he marginalized the Mexican community, and he has just gone day into day and day and day, and there's nothing else that the media can do but start putting all these pieces of the puzzle together. There's a lot of things that we as Americans need to talk about, that we need to, and I would precisely blame Donald Trump for the division. And that's his number one campaign message.
He's given voice to it, Luis, but where's the frustration over the Obama administration's failure to move on immigration the way he said that he would, or even Hillary Clinton's campaign talk about immigration reform? I mean, what's the community doing with that frustration?
Right now, the community has gotten out, and there are some, at a local sense, we have Voces de la Frontera, which are out of Milwaukee, and they have done a voter registration outreach into the entire state of Wisconsin to get the Latino vote out. There's a clear example, one of the states, Arizona, for example, where Sheriff Arpaio is being contested, and they think that he might lose this election precisely because of the Latino vote, because organizations have gone out to Arizona and outreach to the Latino community to register and to vote.
It's amazing, isn't it?
To get out and vote is amazing in the entire country. Yeah. In Wisconsin, we have Voces de la Frontera and other entities, and I think the country will be surprised with the output and the Latino vote this time around.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about down ticket races, and we're going to talk about where we go from here and much more right after this.
We could speak for days, for weeks, months about Hillary's many crimes against this country.
There's a lot of noise and distraction, but it really comes down to what kind of future we want and who, as our president, can help us get there.
They are reopening the case into her criminal and illegal conduct.
We are calling on the FBI to release all the information that it has. Even Director Comey noted that this new information may not be significant, so let's get it out.
I'm back with a panel of Madison thought leaders as we are talking about the election and talking about the campaigns and looking forward to Tuesday's election. And just, you know, in terms of moving away from the presidential election just slightly, Karen, it's, you know, kind of what you're seeing with down ticket races, issues like generational stuff. You know, what impact do you see here from these campaigns?
Well, I know that, you know, Paul Ryan is really concentrating his efforts on that, and I think there's been less attention to those races, but here in Wisconsin, of course, the senatorial race is tighter than what some people thought at the beginning. So I think there's, you know, some concern out there, but you know, I think there's been a lot of focus on the presidential race. Yep. Yeah.
Generational, do you see that? Do you see that playing out in the Latino community at all?
In regards to the Senate race?
But in the election in general, are young people motivated to get out and vote like they were in the past two elections?
Sure. One of the things that the organizations have outreach to the Latino community is to the young crowds and to the older crowds. There are a lot of Latinos that are resident, that are not citizens, that cannot vote, and what they have done, they have spoken to their kids, to their grandkids, to their nieces, nephews, to get out and vote, the importance on getting out to vote so that Donald Trump is not elected president.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when it comes to young voters of color, in particular African American voters, I think that there's some hesitation among millennials. There was an article in the Washington Post just a few weeks ago about the fact that young black voters are wary of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump because of reasons that Louise stated, and also with Hillary Clinton because of the 1994 crime bill, and because, you know, she panders, and, you know, she panders to various groups, and I think that for a lot of young voters, they're looking for someone who is a true leader, and they don't see that with these two candidates. As it relates to races like the Senate race here in Wisconsin, I think that the Trump-Clinton effect has trickled down to that as well. I think more so negatively affecting Trump than it is for Clinton when it comes to Democrats versus Republicans. But you're seeing that in those races too.
Karen, can you even imagine next Wednesday voices for healing this divide? I mean, can you conceive of whether it's the victorious presidential candidate, whether it's House Speaker Ryan, whether it's other leaders saying, okay, the election is over, now we have to come together? Because I think the perception is the divide is going to be here for 4 years and it's going to be ugly.
Right. I think that has to be the message coming out of this, because you know, we've heard for months and months about all this division, and a lot of people, frankly, are tired of it. And you know, you mentioned the younger voters. I think the fact that we're not hearing about them and they're not energized, I think, is a reflection of that. So, I mean, I would be, you know, it would be a welcome thing if someone stepped up and talked about how are we going to heal this racial divide.
Can you?
Well, I hate to be a pessimist, but I don't see it happening. And I think, to Karen's point, it would be nice to see someone somewhere step up and say, now it's time for us to come together. But the seeds have been sown for this for a very long time. Whether it's what we see now in Donald Trump, or what we've seen in Hillary Clinton. And what I mean by that is, I think people are tired of, when it comes to Democrats, the wait your turn politics. That, it's my turn now, so therefore I'm the nominee. And I think what we've seen in the primaries between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and what we found out in some of the WikiLeaks stuff, that obviously there was that was at play when it comes to candidates, and making sure that a particular candidate is indeed the front runner or indeed the nominee. I think young people and young voters are tired of it. I think the voting public in general is sick of it, but I think in particular young voters, they're looking for someone or someones to step up and be a leader, and to take ownership of issues, and they don't see that right now.
If we don't hear that, Luis, it's going to say that we have basically, again, we are ungovernable, that we have a Congress and an executive branch that cannot function because of the divisions. And so things like immigration reform, like health care, like so many of the issues that I think have spawned a lot of the anger here are not going to get dealt with? I think we dealt with, in February, we dealt with a day without Latinos, and I think the politicians have gotten away of the Constitution was made of the people, for the people, and I think politicians have gotten away from that, and because of the interest, the money interest, because of their pandering, as they say, to the money, I think that's a big a black scar, I should say, on when you get hit on your skin. We call it in Spanish a moretón. I think in politics, that is so wrong, money being involved in politics. Thank you all very much for doing this.
Thank you.
After the election, I'll reconvene the band, and we'll reflect on what happened.
That should be fun.
We're going to come back right after this.
Thank you.
My thanks to Karen, Darrell, and Luis, and to you for joining us. Vote on Tuesday, and we'll see you next Sunday on For the Record.